This is the freestyle way.
How are you, my friend?
It's great to see you. I'm doing great. It's great to see you, Carl.
Yeah, when we saw you, Tanya and I, when we saw you a few weeks ago at the breakdancing event, we both left, and when we got in the car, we looked at each other and we were like, how about Chuck? Reverse aging.
If you could tell me how to do that, that'd be great.
Well, you look great, and I thought, wow, time does not pass for Chuck, and I just felt compelled to reaching out again and seeing if you wanted to talk on the podcast. And
That's great. I have my sort of theory on this is that you have to do what do we know about aging research, right? You have to do intense physical exercise that requires complex coordination. Some people think just play table tennis, but I don't know how to play table tennis. So, my dad played table tennis, and he said that's when we played in, we were in the military. We played, but that's the, so I've been doing this stuff for a long time. It's good stuff. It was great to see you and Tanya and the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. Chuck, ever since I met you, which I want to say we probably met in 2004, 2005.
Yeah, that's about right. That sounds about right. About
at
20 years
Acro
ago.
Sports. Yeah. And it's incredible.
That actually may have been at Stanford.
It may have.
Because you used to bring your guys down to Stanford to do gymnastics with us, right? You were very good. They were talented.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, so I guess that's where we met and how we got started. But you have a completely different background than gymnastics and sport, but you're very well versed in the modality of gymnastics. Can you just tell us in a nutshell, what is it that you do? What does Chuck do?
Oh, in the real world. Well, I have a PhD in theoretical chemistry and physics. So I work in the tech industry, like half the people here in the Bay Area. I've been doing a lot of consulting work in AI, but I also work with the Page family office, like Larry Page. Mm-hmm. So his brother runs a climate change institute. And I do some consulting work for them on things like nuclear physics, quantum computing, that kind of stuff, just to kind of help them out with some of their efforts. And the big thing we're trying to do is promote nuclear power. So I try to help them out with that kind of stuff. So just basic consulting. I do a lot of AI work, and I do the past 6 months or a year or so, I've been mostly focused on putting together an AI product. So I've just sort of turned down the consulting a little bit. I've just been trying to build a product out. So, super nerdy technical stuff that, you would find in the Bay Area.
Yeah, totally. And is this Weight Watcher AI?
Weight Watcher AI, yes.
Can you talk to us about Weight Watcher AI? What is this thing? Where does this come from, and where is it going?
I'll tell you how it got started. It's really you, because you had started this blog and podcast years ago in CrossFit, teaching CrossFitters gymnastics. I thought that was just great. I need to start a blog. So I started I used to do theoretical physics. So I started writing a blog on theoretical physics, and I was just, random things, right? Like really, pretty, I look back at some of the old posts and they were pretty awful. I mean, just basic stuff, right? And then, I sort of started doing more of this. I started going to conferences, and I met an old friend of mine who was at UC Berkeley, and we got to talking about some of the things going on in AI and why these things work. And there's all this AI stuff is out. You see it now with Chat GPT and Stable Diffusion. I mean, eventually there'll be probably AI gymnastics coach, something like this. It's everywhere. And I did this stuff back in the 90s when I was in school, and it sort of died out. It came back, and we were we should try to figure out why this stuff works. Nobody knows why it works. It's amazing. It works. It does amazing things. No one really understands why it works. So I started thinking about this and working on the blog, and then we started writing papers and doing research, and then we published in Nature, which is a famous journal. I've been doing this all in my spare time, sitting in and then of course the pandemic hit. So I had nothing to do, I'm trapped in my house. And I just started working more and more on it. And now I've got it to a point where I think we might be able to turn into a startup. And I'm trying to see if I can develop into a product people might want. So I'm sort of in that early, I have an idea, I have research, I'm trying to figure out whether it's useful for anybody. Mm-hmm. And if it's not useful, I'll probably end up coaching children's trampoline. But if it is, then I'll be able, so that's what I'm doing. And I've been doing this, and I'm lucky enough that I have support from the Page family, who, because I do consulting work. So I'm able to support my research through my consulting work.
Yeah.
But, right, so that's what I've been doing for the past, year or so, just trying, during the pandemic on for a while, then trying to, and the idea is it's a tool which lets you try to understand. It's like a microscope for these AI models, and it lets you peek inside. The AI models have something called weight matrices. There are a bunch of layers, and every layer has a weight matrix. So it lets you watch the weight matrix to figure out whether the model is breaking or not. That's why it's called Weight Watcher. Not because I'm overweight,
Right. You're just an S away from being Weight Watchers. Yeah, right?
Yeah, it's a great, and the idea is that, somebody makes a model, and the way they make AI models now is very much brute force. They just try everything. They spool up 1,000 computers, and they try tweaking all these parameters, and you try to get something that works, and if you find something that works, it works. And you're not really sure if it breaks and when it breaks, and it might break in random places. And if you've tried using any of these models like ChatGPT, it lies to you. It'll tell you stuff, and it just makes stuff up. And nobody understands like why these things work. If you don't understand why they work, there's no way you're going to be able to build them in any efficient way. So I think it's sort of where the steam engine was, where people built steam engines, and they, went across the world and built steam locomotives, but nobody understood thermodynamics or physics. None of that existed. So we're trying to figure out why these things work so we can make tools that we can sell to people.
Yeah, I totally hear
that.
And
that's the idea.
I love it. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you is not only because you're a genius, but also because when you speak of things, it's inevitable to kind of fall in love with what you're saying because you have a deep passion for everything that you like.
Well, you got to do what you love, you only live once.
Exactly. And every time I'm around you, I'm like, wow, who is Chuck? I'm who's this guy?
This is why you come to California, why people come to San Francisco. When I'm back in Columbus, I grew up in Ohio and went to school in Chicago, everything is very negative. Oh, I want to do this. No, you can't do that. That's not going to work. There's an excuse for this. Everyone has an excuse for something. I just, all right, I just go somewhere where people are doing things and just do it. And that's it. Maybe you'll fail. Okay, you fail, but, that's why we come out here, is because the rest of the, other places, you have to get away from that negativity and go someplace where everybody is doing things. That's why I say your blog, like I said, well, Carl's doing this blog, he's teaching people gymnastics, I should do something. So I just started, plugging away at it. And I think, it's just, you just do it, and maybe something will come out of it. Maybe it won't, but you just keep, plugging away at it.
Exactly. Let's talk about AI for a little bit. When did you first learn about AI, and where do you see it going at the moment? Where are we in the arc of its progression?
I'll tell you how I got interested in it. I used to do, I was doing we had a college club doing gymnastics. And, you try to learn skills. How do I learn a branny? Okay. Well, I always had the twisties. I just go crazy and I just, try to kill myself. You try to make your twisties, you try to flip. For people who don't know, you try to flip and twist. Instead of flipping first and then twisting, you twist first and then flip, which is very dangerous. and you just like, why is it I tell my body to do something and my brain does something else? And I just go crazy. You try to figure stuff out. And you realize, and there was a guy at the university who was a friend of mine. I was doing a Ph.D. work at Chicago, and there was a fellow there who was an expert in trying to understand mathematical models of neurochemistry. And he was a friend of my advisor, and we talked. I said, when I finished getting this PhD thing, I'm going to go see if I can work in AI and, do some postdoctoral work, and try to understand it. And so back in the 90s, people were doing this, and I got involved in it. And I was still doing gymnastics back then, doing 4 hours a day of that stuff. And, I was really into it. And that was sort of how I got interested in it. And, I come from a mathematical physics chemistry background. How do you make models of how neurons work? That's where this stuff comes from. And people have been doing this for, since the 60s, the 70s, trying to figure this out. And I think what's happened in the past 10 years is that all of a sudden people realized this stuff really works. And there were people like Elon Musk and some others Peter Thiel, who were willing to put literally billions of dollars of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, well, probably $1 billion or more into research to figure out how to make this stuff work. And so you've got thousands of people, everyone in the Bay Area. If you go to Starbucks, you'll be 5 guys sitting at the desk, all doing AI, and they're all doing it here. And so you have so many people working on it. They've sort of figured out how to make a simple model that can mimic some of how we learn. And these were models that were based on old mathematical physics models from the 90s, and they sort of died. It came back, and now we're at a state where there's just been so much money and so many people working on it that we've just made these huge advances. And so we're at a point now where, one of the guys, I'll give you an example of the kind of stuff you can do. I've been involved in doing Olympic weightlifting. I got involved in CrossFit, but I realized I need to do more Olympic weightlifting. So I started doing Olympic weightlifting, and we have like a program. You get a program, the coach writes you a program, do some snatches, do some clean and jerks, do some pulls, do some squats. So you can go to this thing called ChatGPT, and you can go, write me a program for Olympic weightlifting, and it will write you a program. Write me a program in the style of this coach. Write me a program in the style of this coach, given that I'm 25 years old, I want to gain, and it does it. And it's actually pretty good. That's amazing. So we're at the point now, I think, where you're going to have these assistants that, like calculators on steroids, just like, and they'll be able to assist you doing things and will reduce some of the cognitive load that you have to do, especially in writing, drafting contracts, writing emails. They're not perfect. They make a lot of mistakes. So you still need to get involved. The human needs to still be there, but that's here now. Right?
Yeah, I use ChatGPT every day. I've used it to review a contract. I've used it to do bookkeeping. I've used it to create a framework for something I'm going to write. I have taken transcripts, created summaries or structures for summaries. I use it every single day. And something that I've become fascinated with is this idea of just prompt engineering and how and I guess this is a thing now, right? It's like prompt engineering. Yeah. But this is something that you've probably done your whole life.
Well, it's new. I mean, what's happened is that it's funny. There's a guy in our gym who's a weightlifter, very strong. You actually might know his girlfriend, Alex, who was, she's an international level weightlifter, who was also a circus performer.
Okay, what's the last name?
Alex, give me a second.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. Alex.
She's I call her Irish Alex. It'll come back. Craig. Alex Craig.
Rings a bell.
She used to train over at the Circus Center.
Okay.
So Patrick has just been, he stays up all night doing prompt engineering.
Amazing.
Like he's been up all night doing it, like really? No, what's happened is that they have this very simple model, this very simple mathematical model, AI type model. It's like 100, 200 lines of software. It's not like 1 million lines of code, right? But it turns out the more data you feed this thing, the smarter it gets. And what they've discovered is that if you just put in more and more data and you train it and you make it bigger, and bigger and you put more data in, all these properties are emerging that it appears to have the cognitive ability of a small child. And it's very scary because, you can measure, like if you go to a psychologist at Stanford, and they have these various cognitive tests they'll give children. You have a little kid. Over time, they pick up they're able to do certain things. And they run the tests on ChatGPT, the newer, the more sophisticated version. They find that, well, this thing can actually pass a lot of these tests. Yeah. And it turns out it couldn't pass it last year, but the new models can. And the bigger they get, the better. And these properties just seem to emerge naturally. And nobody knows why they emerge. And of course, it makes a lot of mistakes. And nobody knows whether the mistakes are fixable. Like some people say, well, we'll always make mistakes. If there's not fixable, other people, we'll find a way to fix, right? Nobody knows.
Wait, so you're saying that these properties that are emerging from AI, they're not new lines of code that you can see?
No.
What do you explain that? What does this mean?
So what they have is a very simple model. It's called a transformer. It was just like a simple mathematical model, which sort of mimics the way neurons work. Okay, it's designed to mimic some basic neurochemistry, like a mathematical. It's uses a little college level linear algebra. It's not particularly complicated. The reason it works, of course, because there's thousands of engineers who have written all this software and developed all these computer chips that can run it. And at this point, the software is so advanced, you could write this model. It would take you a day to read the code. It's a couple hundred lines of code, not particularly complicated. But if you stack them up, so you take these transformers, and they're like little neuron emulators, and you stack them up, and you make big models which contain maybe 1,000 layers. Like some of the models I'm looking at today, they're like 1,000 layers.
Mm-hmm.
So then you train it, and maybe the ones, I don't know, nobody knows like how big the ones are at OpenAI or Google. They could have 10,000 layers, and they just can make them bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you just put in more data. And then what they're doing is you then have it interact with a human, and you will ask it a question, and it gives an answer, and the human judges, is that correct or not correct? And then the human can give a response, and then they do, and maybe you'll train it on like 50,000. You'll give it 50,000 questions, and you'll have a human interact with it just to sort of teach it the way a teacher would teach a child. You this, yes, no, this is a correction. It's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. I believe that I always get reinforcement learning with human labeling. Excuse me, RLHL, reinforcement learning with human labeling. So the idea is you're trying to get it to mimic the response of a human. Well, it turns out that when you do this, the thing is able to learn. It's somehow these properties just emerge. So the fact that it can read a contract and draft a contract, it wasn't specifically trained to draft contracts. Now, it might have interacted with a lawyer, and the lawyer may have asked some basic questions, and the lawyer answered it, but it wasn't like it was specifically designed to do that. It just sort of emerged.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Yeah, no, and nobody knows, and part of my own research is sort of theories from physics of, we sort of expect these emergent properties. And there's some reasons for this, but this is just sort of happening. And it just sort of happened the past few years, these properties started emerging. And it turns out you just give it more compute time. You give it more data. The other thing, this is a point made by Paul Graham, sort of a famous entrepreneur investor out here. He said, unlike what makes this technology so amazing is that it scales with money linearly. The more money you put in, the more powerful it gets. The average organization doesn't scale like that. You put money in, and you need people to do the work, and people are hard to deal with. They argue. Not everyone's aligned, and usually it doesn't scale that easily. You might have 10,000 employees, and only 100 of them are really super performant. But it turns out that it's just very hard. Humans are slow, but this thing, the more you put in, the more you get out. And so they just keep pouring in more and more data and more compute power, and these properties are emerging, and pretty wild, huh?
It's super wild. And is this one of the reasons why somebody like Elon Musk is advising people to be very cautious when it comes to the development of AI, because there are properties that are emerging that are out of our control?
Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of, because it could be widely misused. Certainly Elon Musk is very, the way he said it was the reason he took over Twitter. We live in San Francisco. You used to live here. It's a little, it's a little kooky, right?
It's crazy.
So that's fine, but you can't let these people run society, and you can't give them all your money. Like these guys running FTX. You saw that. The guys living in a commune. I'm like, our whalers. You go, well, back in the '60s, people lived in communes. They go, yeah, but you wouldn't give them your life savings,
right?
Those aren't the people you give $3 billion to. Well, this sort of, he came in and said, look, there's a lot of political turmoil and censorship, and you can't have one company or one group of people deciding what is information. That's very, very dangerous. Because they're going to make, their sort of their own eclectic, goofy ideas. You have to have freedom of speech. You have to have freedom of thought. People have to be able to express and share ideas. Otherwise, things could get things could go south very quickly. And And that's one of the big concerns, is that when you you interact with this thing and it has a certain opinion and no other opinion is allowed. That's not good. That doesn't lead to good, because nobody's right about everything.
Right.
And that can lead. And so he's very concerned about that. But I think there are also, real concerns now from a military perspective. We're in this crazy war now, in Ukraine. And, this technology can be used in a military way. It can be used not only to build weapon systems, because not only is the language part of AI good, but the visuals part is now very good. And the robotic controls are very good. So you have robots now that can, you can tell the robot, tie a shoe, cook an egg, peel an egg, draw a picture. And you just say that and it can do it. So you can imagine these things in the battlefield, in the warfield, could be very, very dangerous. And then there's also just more the more general concern, like, where's the technology going? Like, will this thing actually start, if it gets loose and start doing things? I think there is an example of one of these, you have these CAPTCHAs that you have. If you try to log into somebody's account, you have to prove you're not a robot.
Right.
So somebody used ChatGPT to go out and find someone on the internet, talk to them, convince them that it were a human, but they were blind and couldn't do the CAPTCHA and do the CAPTCHA for them. So it's just amazing what it can do. And so it's a little scary.
It is scary. And do you know, by any chance, how it works with different organizations or companies running their own AI programs? So, like, for example, Microsoft or Bing, Google, and then OpenAI. Do they communicate with each other, or is it completely separate programs? How does that work?
They hire students, right? A lot of the research is going on in university. They hire students. And of course, they try to hire from each other. So what's happening is that I don't think there are conferences, and people have conferences and they talk about, like, there are conferences you present your research. So they're willing to show some of what they're doing. But there's also just cross-pollination being in the Bay Area. Just because everybody. So people sort of talk to each other, even if there's no formal discussion. And that's one of the things they don't like, right? That's why you eat lunch at the company, and they don't want they don't want people going to, I don't want people to go to a CrossFit gym and talking to other people, because, that's what happens is engineers talk, the nerds talk to each other.
Totally.
Because they're nerds. They talk about nerdy, so you talk about nerdy stuff. What else are we going to talk about?
Exactly.
So, but that's what's going on. And so they try to keep things close to the vest, but, people move around. There was a big lawsuit against Apple and Google a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago. The government came in and said, look, you can't stop. They had this agreement that they weren't going to hire each other as employees. Well, that's illegal. That's both federal and state crime. And they had to pay like a $500 million fine. Because you're not supposed to do that. You can go and, in California, there are no, and this is special about California, unlike anywhere else, there's no non-compete law. So if I go work at Apple and I want to go work at Google, Apple can't stop me. There's nowhere else in the country where they have laws like that. If you work at Apple, you can't go work at a competitor. But here in California, you can. And so that, I think, creates a lot of cross-pollination. The other thing that's happening is that people are leaving to do their own startups. Right? So, like, I'm at Google, and I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. It's like, I'm at Microsoft. I was at Meta. I was running a group at Meta, and we had a chatbot, and one of the people on my team wanted to create a chatbot, and Meta didn't want to do it. So, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to go to Microsoft. So he left. I can't, but like, normally that person would quit, go get venture capital, and do it themselves. So a lot of that is happening. People who, if you can't get things done, you just go and start a company.
Right.
So there's a lot of formal there's a lot of cross-pollination here.
Yeah. And you run pretty much independently right now. So you do your own thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of like in stealth. I'm out there, but I'm not trying to, I'm kind of out there, but nobody's really paying attention. So I'm just kind of coasting, waiting to try to get this thing done. I'm very, it's coming along.
Yeah. And why have you opted for that route?
Well, I kind of fell into it. Like I started doing this research on my own, and it just sort of took off. And I said, so I've been, at some point, if I want to really get the thing off the ground, I'll probably have to raise some funding. But, there is this sort of a 0 to 1 problem you have. You have to show that you have something and that you can convince and you find other people want it. And I'm sort of in this very unique situation because I have this consulting work and I work with the Page family. So I'm able to just support myself by doing this, which most people would not be able to do.
Exactly. And you live you live in an expensive city, expensive area. So of course, it's very interesting. Now back to AI.
You can't do it anywhere else. I could go back to Ohio and not spend any money, but they see, like everyone here is doing something. So you got to just be that. You need that energy.
Yeah.
Even if you're by yourself, like there's still people working with me. I have a Discord channel, and we have people on the channel. And Mike, right now my project's totally open source. So my goal is to try to get more people using it.
Yeah, makes sense. And have you received any feedback from it that has been encouraging?
I have. I got a new guy who's been working with me, Chris. He's fantastic. We've got a few people. It kind of goes. People get interested and they kind of go away. But we've got a few people now, and we've got almost 100,000 downloads.
Oh wow,
that's pretty good. Oh yeah. It's not like 500 people, no, but it's difficult to get people to engage.
Right.
It actually is quite hard. I'm probably more extroverted than most researchers.
You really are extroverted, but you have the power of the introverted mind, and I'm fascinated by you, Chuck, and how you think. Because even when we just were talking about gymnastics, the way that you thought about gymnastics to me was amazing. And I
was remembering gymnastics when I was with you, stuff I did in my childhood. Go ahead, I interrupted you.
No, but no. I'm just saying that you helped me understand gymnastics in a different way when we were working together, and it was just very inspiring. And to hear how the way that you think about gymnastics, you think about the work that you do outside of gymnastics and fitness in your professional career as a scientist is cool, and it has to do with learning. And this idea of deep learning is something that I really care about. And I kind of wanted to before I go into deep learning, I'm curious, just for people listening, they probably hear this idea, this concept of artificial intelligence or AI, and then they hear maybe something along the lines of it, which is machine learning. What's the difference between the two?
So machine learning is a type of statistics on computers. So it's a different subfield. It was sort of about 10 years ago. It was like hot stuff. Maybe 15 years ago. And that's when I was doing machine learning. I was like one of the few people doing it. Now, everyone and his brother is doing it. It's really sort of old school statistical modeling. And really it's useful for doing things like modeling spreadsheets. If you have a spreadsheet and you have some data and you want to predict something, then machine learning is the way to go.
Right.
Deep learning and AI is more about things that the mind can do. So textual, analyzing text, talking, interacting, doing chatbots and, reading documents and analyzing them, generating images, right? Computer vision, whether you're trying to detect, is that a cat or a dog, or you're trying to make a self-driving car. Reinforcement learning, playing games, video games, chess, Go. Those are things that really the humans are good at. What are humans not particularly good at? Well, looking at a giant spreadsheet and trying to make a predictor algorithm. That's totally statistics. So machine learning is much more sort of statistics on computers and using very advanced techniques. And AI is much more like trying to emulate how natural things, text, vision, sound, composing music, things like that.
Yeah, fascinating. And to kind of go back in time a little bit, I remember we met once, and you mentioned a website that I don't know if I'm allowed to mention, but you mentioned a website that you were consulting for. I'm just gonna say it, LiveStrong, I believe it was.
Oh yeah, those guys. Yeah. That was a while ago. Yeah,
that was a while ago.
We were big news at one point. You'll LiveStrong. Those guys, him and Lance Armstrong and his
Anyways, but that was an interesting time because something that you were doing was, I guess you were consulting on the machine learning side of things to make them as searchable as possible, right? So
yes. So what we did there was part of at that point there was a company called eHow, and eHow was actually the website. It was called Demand Media, and at that time, Demand Media was the first $1 billion IPO since Google.
Wow.
Yes, I remember trying to get this project off the ground. You might have remember I was talking to you back then about I had this idea that I could use AI to create titles of web pages.
That's what I remember.
And those titles could then be you could not the AI would not only create the title of the page, but it would figure out how much traffic the title would get if you SEO'd it. And so what we were, and that was, so I was sort of, I'm glad you remember that. I was predicting this idea that you could use AI to generate text. That was, 2010, 2012, maybe 2012. So what we did at eHow is that we essentially, and I say it in a layman's way, I don't want to make the legal term of reverse engineered Google PageRank.
Mm-hmm.
So we were producing 200,000 pieces of content a day. eHow, LiveStrong, a variety of other properties at Demand Media. And I had developed an algorithm which you could predict how much traffic you would get to the website before you wrote it.
That's incredible.
And we became the first $1 billion IPO since Google. And then Google turned us off. And so the stock went like this. And then it went like this.
Unbelievable.
And that was just wow. And I used to go down to tell you what it was like. I used to go down to Santa Monica all the time because we were in Santa Monica. And we'd hang out me and the CTO would hang out like some hotel on Ocean Boulevard. And they were always like these hotel parties, and all the athletes and the movie stars would come to the hotel party. And we'd be upstairs on our computers hacking. Like, you guys got to get out of here, We're guests at the hotel. Yeah, but you can't be here on your computers hacking with the movie stars here, that's what we were doing. But it was like a big ride. We went up, we went down, but we were doing that. I mean, we were probably one of the first machine learning IPOs. I mean, that was 2010, 2011.
Yes, it was probably 2011.
Yeah, I think so.
That makes sense because I remember us talking about this back then.
Yeah, and I tried to do it. Of course, that was.
Did you leave with any cash?
I only took cash, and the reason was, I know, because I know some of the guys at Google. So someone had told me, hey, we're going to turn these. We got a guy at Google whose whole job it is to figure out how to turn what you guys are doing, like what I'm doing, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I got like. Oh, and of course I mentioned this, to the executive team. Oh, no, Google's not going to turn us off. I'm like, I'll take cash. Thank you. So I took all cash in that deal. And of course, they weren't too happy with me because, none of the executives got their earnout. The CEO, of course, did very, very well. But everyone else was sort of, at that point, I was probably making more than they were. The whole thing collapsed. I'm like, yeah, they turned you off. That's just.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a type of platform risk. If you're only using one platform and the platform decides they don't want you there, you're out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that was the first. I always thought that should have been an antitrust case because I knew that they had specifically targeted us.
Of course.
And I knew that
was obvious.
I was told directly by someone who was involved in it in the process. But I probably should have shorted the stock, but that would have been illegal.
That's illegal, my friend. Well, I'm glad that you took the cash and you learned something from it. And I believe, I don't know if I'm making this up, but I believe YouTube is doing something similar now where you can upload a video and before it goes public, it will predict how well it's going to do.
I wrote the first YouTube predictor. They licensed it from Demand Media.
Really?
It was like a $50 million licensing deal for them. They you can predict now, they have all the data. If you have the data, you can look at they sort of know the title and you sort of, if you know the title and you know the audience, they can guess, basically how much traffic you're going to get. I mean, because they know how much things are worth because they have all the data.
Mm-hmm.
The magic of Demand Media was that we were collecting all of this data. And back then, Google, when you entered a search, Google would tell you what search came to your website. So you knew, oh, I was searching for, how to do a backflip, and it would see, oh, then you knew who was coming to you. And so I was able to take all of that inbound search traffic and reverse it, engineering, figure out if I were to write a web page about, how to do a muscle up, I could estimate how much traffic it would get. Well, they turned all that data off because they realized you could do that.
Amazing.
So, a large part of AI is, what data can you get access to? And that's a huge issue, having access to the highest quality data and people who can review it and interact with it. That's like gold.
Right, because now OpenAI, as I understand it, doesn't have access to the internet per se, so it can't go to websites, but it does have a database that's been pulled up until 2021, I believe, that's been inserted.
Well, they
there
have
somehow.
the Common Crawl. So the
Okay,
Common
so
Crawl
yeah,
would be
talk
an
to us
open
about
source.
that.
Right, but what they don't have are, like, they wouldn't have traffic numbers. Like, they don't know how popular one web page is versus another. That would be, you could estimate that from, like, Wikipedia traffic. That a lot of that, but I think more is they don't have, it's hard to say because you can buy data from people, right? People will sell it to you. Now, as a demand media, we bought data. They would drop $500,000 on a piece of data. So I think more with OpenAI is just they're willing. What they've done is they've been willing to take a chance. They put out a product that I can tell you 100%, because I know, at Google, Meta, I know people at Meta and at Google who have said this. Look, we had this product internally, but the company didn't want to release it. And I think that's typical of any large organization. Organizations can invent things, but they don't innovate. They don't necessarily take those inventions and bring them to market. And, for a variety of reasons, usually it's political. One person in the company doesn't want to lose their status by letting somebody else be successful, so they hold it down. Or they have some excuse. Oh, we're afraid of this, but, they don't want to hurt their brand. Google doesn't want to damage their ad business by releasing a product which would compete with it. OpenAI, that's what they do, of course.
Makes sense.
And I think that's, so it's like, it's sort of, they would say everybody had, a lot of the big companies probably, Amazon, Meta, Google, they had something similar internal, but OpenAI had the guts to actually turn it into a product you could give to people.
So now, kind of to your project, how did you get 100,000 people to use this tool?
I just talk a lot, and people, well, it's got a good name, right? Weight Watcher's got a good name. And I've done a lot of podcasts, and we published in a very famous scientific journal, Nature Communications, which is very prestigious. Yeah, and I did my spare time with no funding, so that's not bad. I had an intern work with me, Serena. She was fantastic. But the project was not funded, so we did it. And that got a lot of publicity, and I've just been, and of course the thing works, it does something useful. So people want to try it out. And, the internet is, you have people there's so many people in the world doing AI. 100,000 is not bad.
It's not bad at all. Yeah, exactly. And what have you learned from 100,000 people using this tool?
It's hard to get feedback.
Tell me.
People, not everyone wants to engage.
That is
true. I think a
true.
lot of it is, even like some of our top users say, well, I use the tool, we love the tool, but because I'm in a company, I can't tell you what I'm doing.
Wow.
So there's a lot of that. We know, for example, for a fact that Amazon has an internal version of it because it's through the Amazon Scholar program. They were working with UC Berkeley, but again, same thing. I work at Amazon. I can't tell you what I'm doing with it. So we know you're doing something with it, but you can't tell us. Okay, that's fine. And that's sort of the hitch, I think, has been the hard part, is getting people to really engage in an open way. And I think also a lot of people, they may be nervous because they're a little, they're new to the tool and they don't really want to expose. They don't know what's going on. It's kind of like when you go to your first CrossFit meet and, you just get smoked and you're like, and you got to kind of be willing to go out there and just do a terrible job Because you're not going to learn anything if you don't. You've got to be willing to, and a lot of people I think are just nervous to take that step forward and really engage. So
That
some
makes
of it I
sense.
think is that we have got some good feedback from people, using it, trying to understand, like they had trouble running it in production. So I cleaned it up so it's easier to run. It wasn't fast enough, so we increased the speed by like 20x now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm interested, because, I share certain things and I create certain tools. They're very rudimentary when they come to like self-development, or in the past it's been gymnastics and whatnot. And you're totally right. One of the things that's been the hardest is getting feedback. And a lot of times is because people don't want to share the secrets that they're learning from using your product.
Yeah. Like
It's fascinating.
and people complain, the product doesn't do this. And then I'm like, I'm not even charging you for it. If you don't tell me what's going on, I can't fix it. And I think a lot of people just want to try it. And then they, they sort of go, I'm trying to to get the friction down so it's easier for people to use it. But I also need to get repeat users. So I need to figure out, like, they may try it and then go away. It's sort of like, I think the same in fitness. They always, people will stay in any program 3 months.
Right.
And that's it. Getting them to go more than 3 months is very hard.
Yeah.
Or people show up for a day. They want to know what, they'll try it out, but they're not really sure. So I'm trying to get it more where they can understand better how it works, and make it useful. But I think the other problem is that, again, people, they don't, it's this AI stuff is quite, it is sort of a specialist activity. It's hard to train your own models, and it's not, a lot of it is very much, it's being done in big companies where there are a lot of silos, so people have difficult talking. But it's opening up more and more. More people are trying to do this, so we're seeing more engagement.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense to me. Now, for a person like myself, I'm a coach, and I'm somebody who works directly with people, and I'm starting to utilize AI tools every day, which I can see now that this is a thing, and it's I guess having a super assistant, like you said earlier. What would you suggest from your perspective? What would you advise people like myself do when it comes to learning about AI, working with AI, implementing it? Yeah, what would your take be?
These are very new tools. And, the two things, you have to experiment with it to see what it can do. And you've got to find other people who are doing similar things so you can trade information. And I think, so I don't think there's anyone I don't think there's any company that say, here's what this tool can do for you, go and do this. Like the prompt engineering. That's not at all obvious to people. That what prompt engineering means, you talk to the AI, it does something, and then you give it feedback, and it can learn from your feedback in real time in context. That's not obvious that would work.
Right.
So, there are a lot of people trying to explain how it works, but I think it's, there are a lot of good podcasts and, a lot of self-learning on YouTube trying to find those channels.
Yeah, I think we're yeah, you're totally right. I think about messing around with it, trying things, seeing what you find, and then sharing that information. I think that is key. Right now, the majority of the popular content around AI is, this is how I made $300,000 a month.
Yes. There's a joke on Twitter, every AI influencer. I'm kind of like an AI influencer on LinkedIn. Every AI influencer now is trying to sell, here are 300 prompt engineering tricks. They'll be free for the next week, right?
Yeah.
No, you've got to find communities of people who are doing this, and people who are willing to engage. And that's what I see, finding those people in those groups is hard. The Bay Area is one of the few places where this is just, there's this sort of this open community. There was an AI meetup this week by one of the big AI companies. I think like 1,500 people showed up. That's a lot of people,
That's a lot of people, yeah.
That's a lot of people. Maybe we should put together like a general, like make a podcast where we're like, here are things you can do with it. How did you do that? Because it's, I've even had clients reach out, not only can you use ChatGPT, you can build AI products using using OpenAI's training facility.
Right.
So I've had some clients come to me, they wanted to build like a tool that would help people like a tool to help women write, like a women's engagement, to help them write blogs, and how you would train your own model to help them do it using what's called Da Vinci. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on as well. Sort of, it's kind of like it's sort of now, I think, where the internet was in like 1995. It's totally new, and there's just all sorts. It's just the possibilities are very, very broad.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that you're trying to do the prompt engineering is very interesting because you got to find people trying to just really explore how far can you push this thing.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been doing is I've just been inputting a lot of data, and one of the things that I've been most excited about is asking it to create tables, to create comparisons of different things, and then just taking that data and putting it into an Excel sheet and just getting a graph to be able to like visualize, have some kind of like visualization. Because right now, I guess ChatGPT Plus, which is not 4, can't really give you images, and if it gives you an image, it's for some reason I just can't see it. But
not great, yeah.
So it's been very interesting to see what it's capable of. I mean, something that I started doing was I started taking my bank statements and I started just cleaning them up in a way where it would just be clean numbers and text, and I would run it through ChatGPT, ask it to just give me a table, and then break it down into different categories, and then do the bookkeeping to see if I could automate this in some kind of way, just to
get rid of your accountant, yeah.
Well, yeah, just to double check, because, you have QuickBooks, then you may do some things manually, and then you want something to be a little bit more automated. So I've been just messing around, how can I do this? And then I'm trying to translate this also into how I'm kind of communicating with people in terms of how can I give them a distilled version of that which I'm currently teaching that can produce individualized results for them. So just trying to figure out how do you create individualized prescriptions from a general template using AI. I'm just messing around with these things.
I don't think people know. Like I said, these things just emerged. Like these properties have emerged, and then all of a sudden people, you look at like inside Meta or Google, like, oh, we don't want to give people this because it's going to make us look bad or for their business. OpenAI was like, look, here's this amazing technology we have. Go figure out what you can do with it. I don't think anybody really knows. And I've seen research talks where people are trying to teach ChatGPT how to do basic math. How do you teach it to do math? And a lot of people are just exploring it and discovering what it can do. They don't really know. Like, it's all new. This is all open territory. And I think just trying to find other people who are doing similar things and just talking to them. Did you try this? You tried that. Look what it can do. Look, we did this. Like, people have discovered, in context learning, prompt engineering. That was not a thing a year ago. A year ago, you could do it with Da Vinci using OpenAI's API, but that's very technical, nerdy stuff, the kind of stuff I would do with a client. Now it's totally open. And I think that it's going to just be more people, hey, look what I did, try this. It's like a whole new software engineering language. And the other thing is, so, where does it make mistakes? How do you keep it from making mistakes? How do you teach it not to make mistakes? Which is very hard.
But, yeah, that's very hard. And sometimes that requires the prompt to include and refer back to something that you said in the beginning that maybe it now has kind of deviated from. It's like it forgets after a few lines.
Yes. Well, yes. Yeah, the more you interact with it, you begin to learn. It's like you're working with, someone who's kind of smart, but either lies to you or doesn't know what's going on. I used to have a gymnastics coach. My first coach, believe it or not, he was first recon division in Nam, and then he was in the CIA. And he would just lie to you and tell the truth. It's like he was the kind of guy you could talk to him. He would just make stuff up as part of conversation.
Wow.
And he could just talk to you. And he said, yeah, you got to, it's like, lying is a skill you have to practice. So he's passed away now. I thought some of the crazy stuff he would do. He was over like in the Middle East, like teaching people gymnastics while he was spying on them for the CIA.
Unbelievable.
And, like setting up Olympic programs and spying on the Saudis and things like this. And he would just be like that. He could tell you like wait, you're making that up. But you ever talk with certain people that just make stuff up as they're going, and it sounds good? That's what ChatGPT does.
And,
it's
fascinating.
And the other thing is that, like, the guy who runs AI at Meta, Jan LeCun, has said this stuff can never work because over time it has a probability of making a mistake, and the more and more you interact with it, the more likely it's going to make a mistake. But of course, the point is that you're interacting with it. So the more you interact with it with the prompts, the more likely you're going to be able to keep it from making a mistake. But you have to kind of go back and figure out, oh, what did it not remember? What did it not understand? It's not at all obvious.
No,
And
it doesn't seem obvious, and it's way above my pay grade. I'm curious.
Well,
yeah, go.
That's the thing. It's not. You're in the same boat as everybody else. It's like this thing. It's like an alien came to Earth. You're talking to it. Like, what is this thing talking? You're just trying to communicate with it, and you're trying to figure out why did it do that? Oh, you've discovered if you interact with it, you can get it to learn.
Right. Yeah. So this is maybe the invasion of the aliens. It's AI, not the UAPs that we're shooting down.
Yeah, those freak me out. Every time I see them, I'm just like, really? They're UAPs, really? How is that not the biggest story?
Yeah.
Since the resurrection. I don't know. I think people are just so like, I don't believe it, right?
Yeah, whatever.
I think there are people like, they don't believe it. They're like, well, of course they're aliens. Yeah, of course. We've known that forever. It's not big news.
It's incredible.
Not news.
Right. Kind of shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious, when people reach out to you for consulting, kind of like talk to Chuck, what are they asking you for?
Well, I used to do a lot of, it's kind of changed over the years. So I would say about 10 years ago, I was doing more like a founder would come to me and I would work with them to develop a machine learning product for the company. So I'd work with them and I'd work with the founder, and maybe I would bring some staff in, maybe not. And we would try to develop a product. And then it started being more, can you act as a mentor? So like we want to bring you on 10 hours a week for consulting, and we're going to have you work with one of our staff. We're going to have them you try to teach them AI. And we're going to try to mentor you as at an executive position. And so it sort of changed from managing large whole projects to being more, we want to do it internally, and we want you to sort of help us understand what to do. So I've had a broad range of projects. I've had some clients come to me who are in the finance industry and say, look, we want to raise capital for a new fund. Can you help us develop a product that we can go out and raise institutional capital?
Okay.
I've had cases where I just go in, like I'm an engineer working on a team trying to fix a search engine. I spent almost 2 years trying to help Walmart. I think I went almost crazy, trying to help these guys. Just like during the pandemic, just trying to help a big company like that is just, the analogy I give is, as a coach, imagine you have, and Alex didn't like this analogy, but the analogy, imagine you have someone who's like really, really obese, and they keep telling you they want to lose weight, and you show them what to do, and they keep telling you you're doing it, and then you come home, you go in their gym bag, and they got like a box of donuts in the bag, like, what's going on here? Like every month, yeah, things break all the time. That's what it's like, like you try to help them, you just can't help them, and you're trying to. It's like
that must be pretty frustrating.
Well, it's large organizations are dysfunctional in a way because they're organizations. It's not the individual people. It's because people over a period of, it's just organizations are they're so disjointed. And so I get a lot of that. I've worked a lot with founders who just want to, sort of develop a product. A lot of it more recently has been more of this sort of, can you show us how this AI stuff works? And just help us do like strategy consulting. Like we want to, it's getting more challenging because it used to be like you could just build a bread and butter product. So I want to build, like one product I built was, we want to classify all the ingredients and all the world's recipes. Okay. So like 10 years ago, that was a fairly hard problem. Today you would ask ChatGPT to do it. You just go, here's the recipe, what are the ingredients, right? Now it's more like someone came to me and said, we want to do a project where we want to know if we have, like, there was a company that makes hearing aids.
Okay.
And they make them by hand. And they wanted to know if you could make and they have to have a mold of the ear. And they wanted to know, is there a way to take a picture of the ear and make a 3D printed mold? Like, that's a really hard project because you don't know if it's doable. And I think people are more interested they're trying to figure out now what makes it hard on these projects is a lot of it is I want to do something that nobody else has ever done before. How do you scope that? So you have to, and it takes more than a day. Like that in itself could be a 3-month project, just figuring out, can you really scope something like that and get it to a point where you think it's doable?
Right.
So there's a lot of that, I think, with AI now, and people are just very, they sort of know they have to do things, and they're not quite sure even where to begin.
Right.
And the challenge is that nobody knows where to begin. How do you start like that?
Yeah.
So
it's very interesting. Very interesting. A few years ago when I was kind of helping Strike Movement develop certain sides of their business, there was a company that came to us that said that they wanted to implement a tool that allowed people to take pictures of their feet, and then it would give them the right sizing.
Same product.
Yeah. So yeah, and that was a very hard problem to solve. I don't think they managed to solve it, but the idea was good.
It's very broad. Like you get a lot of broad different things. Sometimes I just take I'll take like a vanilla, go work in the eBay type company and try to do something for a couple of years just to help them, like bread and butter kind of stuff. And some of it is much more creative. We had one who wanted to do something similar. They were sneakers. I guess people collect sneakers. And the company wanted to build an AI system that could actually price the sneaker. Like you would take a picture of the sneaker and then you try to see whether it had any marks or anything on it so you could price it. Apparently that's a $1 billion industry.
Yeah. I mean, there's sneakerheads all over the place, and they
sneakerheads. Yeah, that was it. Sneakerheads. Right. I'm like, I have to reach. There were some guys in LA actually. There, I have like funny some of the guys who manage the talent in LA. So
yeah,
things like that, and they that was an interesting project. But the problem with a lot of this stuff is that, if you build a website, you know what you're doing.
Right.
I want to build a website. I want a box here, a picture there. It does you can kind of lay it out. It's kind of like
it's a fixed asset.
Yeah. And you can figure out how it's like going the Jiffy Lube. Now you're saying to me, I want to do something that's never been done before. And it's very creative. Well, that's really hard, That's not like building a website for you, so some of the stuff like with Walmart, I tried to do a project where I had built the exact same product for eBay 15 years ago.
Wow.
And I'll try to build it for you, and I'll show you how to build it. That's we've done it before. We should be able to do it now. Not so easy because you're in a different environment, different people, different culture, different data systems. But the stuff that now we're getting to the point with the AI where people want to be creative, like you're saying, how do you do prompt engineering?
Right.
It's a much more of a creative thing, and you have to work with people who have to be willing to understand that it's a creative process and that it's going to take time to do it. And I almost feel like what I'd like to be is kind of like one of these producers, who help the musicians make music, where the musician comes in and kind of knows how to create, and I'm just kind of how to help you produce the album. And you're coming to me with some of the creative capacity, and I'm trying to put it together with some knowledge of AI. But obviously it's very, very technical. But I think that's kind of where things are going. It's becoming much more creative, and people are very much concerned. Like, what do I do? What do we do with our business? They know things are going to change, and they just, how do I scope out what the future is going to be? And I think you're doing the right thing. I always advise people, build things. If you want to know how to do something, build a prototype. See if you can do it. And I'll try to help you.
Right.
And maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
Right. And that's the risk you should be willing to take, but at least you learn something.
Yeah, no, that's right. And you have to have those kind of clients. Otherwise, you'll get to a position where you build something, it doesn't work. Well, we're not going to pay you. Well, that's a problem.
Right. You know what you're bringing up right now, Chuck, that I have known, but I haven't been able to name until this moment, is that as an engineer and a technician, you're actually rooted in creativity first.
With a lot of what I do, yeah. Because I'm a scientist.
Right.
A lot of engineering is, I've done something before and I'm going to do it again. And we're going to use the same techniques and we're going to just do the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
And the reason that works is because, you can control the cost. You can estimate how long things are going to take. You can bring in staff that have specific key technical skills. Doing something creative is much harder because there's a lot of risk involved. Is it going to hit or not? If you write and I think a lot of companies, large companies have the capital to be creative, but they don't have they like I say, they can invent, but they can't innovate. They can create something new, but you can't bring it to market. You can't get people to use it. It's much, much harder. So this creative process, that's sort of like how I also got involved in the research. I'm like, I'm going to do something creative. I'm going to invent something. I got the invention. Now, how do I make the innovation? How do I get it to go from this idea that works to something that people need? And part of that, I think, is technical, and part of that is social.
So innovation in many ways has to do with implementation.
It's implementation, but it's also acceptance. People have to accept that you're implementing something, but you're also sometimes the invention works. Like you have cases where you have there's sort of different ideas. There's inventions where they work, and there's a promise, and then they fail. There are things like that where it works. There are even cases where it works, like take nuclear fission. It works. People accept it. It gets deployed, and then it all gets shut down because reactors blow up and people get scared, or it turns out to be crazy expensive. Then there are cases with invention where you're just not sure if it's going to work. Nuclear fusion. We keep saying we're going to do it, but no one's. It's always 20 years away. Every 20 years, it's 20 years, and then
exactly.
So there's
and
that.
then the time horizon just keeps moving.
But there's very much a human component as well. People have to be willing to accept your ideas and be able to work with you. That's critical. Otherwise, nobody will use it. That's what ChatGPT got right. Everybody had the invention. Google had the invention. Meta had the invention. I'm sure Amazon has internally. But ChatGPT is like, well, we're going to give it to people, and they're going to use it. Oh, well, we don't want people using this.
and ChatGPT got 1 million users within days.
Yeah. So now people are using it. Now they can discover all sorts of things that nobody understood before. You're going to discover all these things you can do with it nobody ever thought of.
Right.
And that I think they got right is they just decided to take a chance, and we're just going to let people use it. We're going to now the question is, will it stay around or will it die? Like, will it be like the BlackBerry where people use the BlackBerry and we don't use BlackBerries anymore? Will something else come in and replace it?
But the BlackBerry definitely led to Apple being able to say, hey, we're going to get rid of the buttons and we're just going to make it internet-centric and make the interface so beautiful that the user experience is amazing.
But that was totally like no one believed that you could get rid of the keyboard. And here's the thing. I have a mentor of mine, George White, who worked at a company, who actually helped found a company called General Magic, which invented the first Newton, the first handheld device. That was a total failure. Like I think there's a movie about it called General Magic where they tried to make this handheld device, and it was called the Newton, and it predated the iPhone. So no one believed that you could get rid of the keyboard, and it worked. And I think that's sometimes timing is very important, but people have to be willing to accept that you can do it. Obviously, the speech recognition has gotten better on the phone, but there's some timing involved as well. But there's a lot of acceptance. People have to believe it, and you got to take risks. I think with AI now, it's just what you're doing is exactly what people are doing. Like how do we get this thing to actually? And what's interesting about me is because you're a coach, you're used to interacting with people and teaching them and trying to figure out, how do I get you to do this, even when you don't know how to get yourself to do it. Right?
Well, yeah,
that was always my experience.
Right now, the thing that it's given me, it's bought me time because it's made me, I want to say, 70% more efficient in certain areas. So
That's incredible.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People think that's going to happen across the board.
it's
But
incredible.
I think it's only going to happen in industries where you have this unique ability to interact with people and try to understand how to get them to do something that they themselves can't make themselves do, and that's a lot of my gymnastics is like that. How do I get myself to do something? I just can't do it. Why can't I do it? I don't know why I can't do it. Well, that's ChatGPT. You want it to do something. It itself doesn't know how to do it, and you're trying to figure it out. And I think that's exactly where everybody is with this technology right now. Like, and within a year or two, it's going to be everywhere. And then you're going to have there are now all researchers like, how do I teach you to do this? How do I teach you to do that? People are just trying to understand what it does. And, the next generation, there'll be GTP5 and it will be much smarter. And I think the future of work is going to change because instead of, you're going to have people are going to now, you're going to have entire industries of people who basically are trying to teach AI what to do. I want to set up a law firm and I want to have ChatGPT review contracts, like you said. Well, you're going to have, 100 lawyers interacting with it, and it's going to be interacting with questions, and eventually it will be like a super lawyer. This is actually what I was doing at BlackRock. 2010. I think I was trying to, I would have this simple AI, very primitive compared to ChatGPT, some simple thing I built, but I would interact with the portfolio manager. I'd ask him, I want you to read this SEC filing and give me a judgment on it. And then I'll build an AI which tries to reproduce your judgment so we could trade on it.
Amazing.
Yeah. That was a great time. Also, there was a CrossFit gym right next door. So I was,
you were there.
I was in the best shape of my life back then,
That's amazing. Well, Chuck, I know we're coming to an end here and you have a hard out because you do have to go get a little adjustment.
I'm listening to your advice, right? Everyone needs to be able to do maintenance on themselves.
I think that was Kelly Starrett who said that.
Was that Kelly Starrett? I thought it was you. I'm attributing it to you.
Thank you. No, I do believe in that too. So I do believe that you should go. I have so many more questions. I have questions about AI, blockchain, AI applied to blockchain. What is that potentially going to be? I'm curious about nuclear power. What's the deal there? I don't know how much you can talk about it. I feel like we have to do a part 2 if you ever want to do that.
I'm happy to. I'm sorry I have to leave early because I tried to change my technique in weightlifting the other day, and I tweaked my back. I go, okay, I can't learn anything new. I'm trying. I'm just gonna stick with what I got. But other than that, I'm happy to do it again. No, this is really interesting. I'd love to see what you're doing with prompt engineering. I think that's that's a whole new way of thinking about how to interact with machines. People,
it's coaching. It really is coaching. Yeah. I'm just trying to coach it on things that I need right now to support my business, so I can do more coaching. That's what I want. I just want more to do more.
You
coaching.
Might end up being, the prompt engineer coach.
Who knows? Maybe
where you coach other people how to do prompt engineering.
There you go.
Nobody knows about that. I've been trying to convince my girlfriend to use. I'm not going to use ChatGPT. You should use it for work. No. I don't want it to replace me.
Well, I use it every day, and I'm going to continue to use it.
That's amazing, right? Using it every day.
Yeah. Every day.
Imagine what Google is thinking. We used to use Google every day. Now you're using this. The fear that must be going through that organization. We missed it. And now they're going to try it. Now, but hopefully, with competition, these things are going to get much, much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I do, and this is the last thing, and then I'll let you go. But sometimes I say, okay, I am going to talk about this thing on a talk. Give me 20 books that talk about it, and then pull out 20 points from each book, and then any point that feels like there's overlap, give me something that is going to allow me to get contrast. So give me speaking points, and it just
and it does it.
It does it.
Yeah, I've been using it. I took some old theoretical physics paper, some esoteric thing, and and I want you to explain this old physics paper to me, and then I talk to it to see, do I actually understand what I'm talking about? Is it BSing me, or is it correct? I was trying to do something called replica theory. I'm like, are you telling? And and after a while of interact, because it will BS you. And you have to figure out, do I really understand it? Or am I letting it BS me? And after a while, you're like, oh, I actually understand this. Like, and I came away understanding this topic 10 times better than when I did it in grad school. I was like, yeah, it's incredible. No, this is the future is here. And the fact that you're using it every day is, I mean,
every day.
That's amazing. I mean,
Yep. Every
it's
day.
only been out like, what, a couple months?
Yeah, I mean, I started playing with it in December, and over Christmas and the holidays, I was just messing around with it, and then I never
I got to
stopped.
get you and Patrick together. He would stay up all night doing it.
That's amazing. All right,
I was
Chuck.
up all night doing Chat GPT. Well, you shouldn't lift then if you're up all night. But,
That's right.
Hey,
That's
it's
right.
great to catch up. I
Super
hope this
great.
was helpful to you.
Yeah, it was really helpful. And when I stop the recording here, don't leave me. So I'm just going to say bye to you right now. Stop recording. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate you. We'll do more. And then stay on the line.
All right.
This is the freestyle way.